I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zayas Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark. Hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome to the show, Arcane Mark. Industry insider making the most of conventions. So, how can you make the most of a convention? It depends on who you are.
Mm-hmm.
That's not just like a random flippant statement.
But yeah, are you someone who's going to a convention for the first time? Are you someone who's primarily going to conventions to play? Are you someone who's going to conventions to connect with people you already know? Are you someone who's focused more on trying new games? Are you someone who wants to run games? Are you someone who is in an industry and is looking to make connections? Are you actively looking to sell things at a convention? You know, it's very different depending on that. And another factor that we'll talk about here that makes things different is the size of a convention, because there's a huge difference between like a small community convention and all the way up to things like Gen Con on the scale of the other side. But there are some things that are pretty much going to be true no matter what you're doing with the convention. So I think it may make sense to go ahead and start off with that.
So when it comes to conventions and making the most of them, there's two things that you're going to be wanting to balance trying to do. You're going to want to be balanced trying to make sure that the convention isn't a flop by making sure you have some minimum amount of success with the convention, while also maximizing your chance of having something great happen at the convention. And sometimes it's not so easy to do that. It's going to require you to adopt a technique that is a sort of a mixture between planning and spontaneity, and a mixture between having things figured out and being able to sort of accept some opportunity that drops in your lap as it comes along.
And there's also a mixture between going and getting involved in the excitement and taking care of yourself, because I find that a common mistake for folks who are new to conventions, and even some folks who have more experience, is being like, oh, I'm just going to keep doing these things, and like I'm going to game into the night every night, I'm going to do this kind of thing. And you see folks, and what they do is, like, let's say that the convention's like Friday, Saturday, or Sunday or whatever. They go full throttle on like Friday and Saturday, and then Sunday they have to cancel all their events because they're exhausted and they don't feel good. So, like, I know conventions are super fun, but like, get your sleep, drink water, find opportunities for food, try to eat some variety of food and not just like fast food or whatever, and you will enjoy your events so much better, even if it means you're not like, you might be like, oh yeah, you know, I'm not doing absolutely everything I could do. So I think with the convention, yeah, and a comment in the thing, and shower, yes, that is both for your own sake and the sake of your fellow convention attendees.
That's right. That's definitely true.
Absolutely true. So so another thing to consider in terms of like taking care of yourself at conventions is conventions, particularly big ones, can be pretty loud and you could be talking a lot. So one of the things that I really swear by for conventions is taking water around with you. Have like a water bottle or other things like that. And also bring like drops for your throat, like cough drops, or just like the non-medicated ones in particular I really like the Hall's Fruit Breezers or whatever, because you don't have to worry about like, oh, am I taking too many or whatever. And it just makes it so much easier. You don't have to deal with this. Not having to deal with sore throats when you're at a convention is great.
This episode of Industry Insider brought to you by Hall's Fruit Breezers. Hall's Fruit Breezers. When you're yelling and screaming at the top of your lungs because everybody else in the room is and nobody can hear each other, that's when you can take them.
Okay, well, whatever.
No, true.
I don't know like other brands that make the same kind of things. I was trying to like disambiguate between that and like the medicated ones. Yeah.
The ones that are pectin versus the ones that have like some kind of menthol or something.
Like the pectin ones are the ones that I really like.
Or whatever it is.
You also want to have you also want to probably have like I love carrying around hand sanitizer at conventions particularly because you never know like what you're going to be touching that a large number of other people also touched, and convention bathrooms can be kind of crowded and not always like the cleanest places. So just being able to be like, oh yeah, I don't have to worry about it. I'm good. I noticed a big difference. Gen Cons before I started carrying around hand sanitizer versus after, I stopped getting con crud. So I swear by that too.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a 100%, but it'll definitely
help I mean, it's not 100%, but it definitely helps out in terms of, like, what you're doing and stuff.
So another big thing to think about is, let's say you haven't gone to conventions. You're just like, I'm gonna go. I'm finally gonna go. I made it. I'm going to a convention. I recommend, based on my experience and those of others I've seen, if you can, trying to go to the convention with other people.
Yes.
No matter what your goal is, no matter which of those types of people you are that we mentioned at the beginning over the list of types of people, even if you're thinking the people I know don't have the same goals that I do, so going together with them might not get me the convention that I want to see, going alone is definitely, just like if you try to solo fights in Pathfinder 2, going alone is definitely a severe encounter.
Yeah. So
or
even
an
if
extreme encounter.
you and your friends want to see completely different things, the fact that you guys can meet up for lunch and dinner and hang out and talk about your experiences, the fact that if there's a long badge line, you have someone to wait with, or if there's a delay in the flight to get there, things like that, it just makes it so much easier.
If you go by yourself, you're at risk of just getting isolated and getting lost in the drift.
And folks are talking also about suggesting bringing Advil, Aleve, or Tylenol, having foot pain. Oh,
you might want to bring shoe inserts.
Shoe inserts are super useful, particularly if you are going to be a vendor or someone who's going to be standing on the floor a lot. They make a huge difference in how sore your feet will be at the end of the day.
That's right.
I get a fresh pair every year when I was going to conventions all the time.
Going back to talking about going with other people, if you actually can go with people who are more experienced with the convention than you, if you're inexperienced with the convention, that's great. Easy mode is going with someone who's experienced at getting the thing out of the convention that you want to get out of the convention, who can help you. Whether that's networking with industry professionals and you have someone who already can network with them, or that's trying out new game systems that you wouldn't get exposed to normally and you have someone who knows the indie scene, right? So that's easy mode. Hard mode is going by yourself, and moderate encounter is when you go with another group, but they kind of don't have any advantages or disadvantages compared to you at getting what you're looking for.
I would say when you sign up for a convention, pay close attention to how their process for signing up for events works, because some conventions have you have to sign up for most of the things far in advance if you want to get involved, and then some of them are going to be more freeform, where they're hey, you can sign up for a few things, and we have a lot of walk-in slots and things like that. So depending upon the way your convention is constructed, that can help you decide how many slots you want to sign up for things in advance. And basically every convention is going to have some things that you can just walk in and try. So reserving slots for things that just catch your interest is great. I'd also recommend reserving a slot fairly early on, that you don't have anything official scheduled in, that you're just going to say, okay, I'm going to spend this time, I'm going to walk around, I'm going to wander, I'm going to find cool stuff, I'm going to go to the dealer hall. Conventions almost always have a dealer hall where you can go and buy stuff. And that way you can go around and check things out, and it makes it much easier, because then you have time to be okay, yeah, I'm going to pick up the map of the convention, I'm going to learn where things are, I'm going to see what are some of the cool events, I'm going to hear people doing a performance in the distance, and I'm going to go over and I'm going to check it out. It helps you to orient yourself too, so that later on, if you're not going to be oh crud, I have my next event is over in Building 11 and I have no idea what Building 11 is, and I'm running around. So
that's right. And so Kitsune Warlock says get your tickets mailed to you for events because the line registration is bad. I'm here to tell you that no solution is great. The line is terrible.
Gen Con, you're talking about. Yeah.
At Gen Con and a lot of other big conventions, the line is terrible. Some conventions, the line will be fine because they're small. Gen Con is awful. But Gen Con lost some of our tickets in the mail, and they would not take the receipt for them.
Yeah, they forced us to rebuy.
They
called us liars.
They called us liars when we said that we didn't get them, and while we were in the middle of trying to go to our events because we were volunteers for Pathfinder Society organized play, and basically the lower ranking people wanted to give us stuff, but they eventually got us to their top boss, and she was just no way, and then we were but then we were but we're volunteers for the local community. Do you really want this to be what we tell people about Gen Con? She's we don't care. We don't need you. And then later she said that after saying she doesn't care because they're big and they didn't need us, they said, we operate on razor thin margins. When I asked, wouldn't it be good for a customer service standpoint to give the benefit of the doubt to probably most people who are telling the truth here when they have all this documentation? And yeah, sure, maybe you'll let one or two people who are willing to spend tons of money on a flight and a hotel, but just randomly the one place where they cheap out is that they want to try to cheat you out of a second pair of the tickets. And she's like, no, we're on razor thin margins. Even one could be the end of us.
So one thing we learned from that is that, like, with a convention, you always want to have a budget for unexpected and annoying expenses coming up.
So the lines are terrible, and losing the tickets in the mail is bad, so you want to pick your poison if you're talking about Gen Con. But yes, have an unexpected budget. Be willing to accept that also your time is going to be used up in ways you don't expect.
Like, Kitsune is talking here about, like, going in day -1 or day 0 also helps orient yourself without wasting valuable con time. That's absolutely true. If you can go to the convention early, it's great. And another thing with that, too, is that, you know, whether you're going with other folks or not, it can give you a chance to start to meet other people. You know, a lot of folks will come a little bit before, and then you can begin with either learning where things are, or, you know, checking out games from the folks who came early, or networking with the people who are already there. Whatever you're
get a head start. Sometimes people will advertise for things that are super early if you're there super early, because not that many people are there if you get there early enough, especially depending on which convention it is. So,
particularly, and Kitsune is also mentioning hotel lobbies. That's a place where people tend to congregate, the hotels that are closest to the conventions. Or as well as some of the early opening event spaces you might start to see. Like, if it's in a convention hall and the convention hall is open, but, like, maybe the dealer hall is not, then you can start to see people congregating and things like that. I mean, be careful not to get in the way of people who are actively setting up. But other than that, also another place you'll see people is, like, the restaurants closest to the convention area. So that gets into another sort of prep type thing is, if you're going to a big convention, give some thought to what you're going to do for your hotels. When you get on the extreme side with, like, Gen Con, they have this whole, like, hotel lotteries and things like that for hotels. Even for somewhat smaller ones, like, hotels in the area might fill up. So getting your hotel sooner rather than later helps you get one that's close to the convention hall, so you don't have to spend all that time, like, going around. And I found personally that having a hotel that's close enough that, like, you can go back and chill in your room for a little bit in the middle of the day if you're just like, you know, because things have been super energetic and stuff like that is great. And then you can come back out refreshed.
So Mr. Blobface gives an example of one thing you could do at a convention, which is GMing for 8 blocks, and then that's kind of what you're doing. So that is something that will schedule you up. It's not flexible, but if that's what you're looking for, you're going to get to meet the players who come to your table, get to meet volunteers and other people who are GMing and network with them, and it can be a great experience. I've done that before when I've been GMing, like, back in the Boston Lodge. I haven't quite run that many blocks at Gen Con, but I have run blocks at Gen Con.
And one thing about running that many blocks is that can be a really great way to experience the convention for folks who are either, you know, very dedicated to running things for a community, or, you know, if you have a situation where running a lot of blocks means that you can get, like, free tickets to the convention or a free hotel room or other perks like that.
Also, if you don't have anyone to go with to the convention, you're guaranteed if you run those blocks, a bunch of people are going to come up to your table.
And then this can be a chance to start meeting folks who you can then come back the next year and see.
Potentially, yes. Now, generally, if you have any of the other variety of goals that we mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I would recommend not GMing for quite so many blocks at the convention, because my main recommendation is to schedule out time, even if some of that is scheduled time to go in the hall. A lot of people like to do that. I personally am terrible at browsing giant convention halls because there's too much stuff, and I can't. All I do is go very methodically through every row, and then I can't really distinguish one thing from the other because there's too many things. If it's small, I actually do better, but at Gen Con I don't. But you can, if you schedule out your blocks, but then be willing to just not do the things on your schedule, which obviously if you're GMing, you cannot do that. You have to do your commitments for GMing, but if you're just going to be playing, then it's kind of okay to miss out on one of those if you need to. and leave yourself flexible to do something else if an opportunity arises. Because a lot of the best things at convention are going to be a weird opportunity that you don't know about in advance.
Particularly if the thing you're signing up for isn't something that's like highly dependent on everyone showing up. So like if you sign up for a game that's like 4 players, all 4 players required or whatever, and then it's like it's going to cause a problem.
Even then, they might be able to find a 4th player.
Yeah. But like,
it happens.
Yeah, but I also find things like, you know, with organized play, they have like walk-ins and they shuffle things around, yes. So it's easy to do that.
As someone who has run convention events that absolutely need everybody to show up, I still got alternates and it worked out. It depends on what convention you're in a lot of ways too. Like something like PaizoCon is more intimate and you can talk more directly to Paizo staffers in the in-person PaizoCons back in the old days.
Back in the day, yes.
Yes, whereas Gen Con is very impersonal, is gigantic, and everything is happening, and there's always going to be something that you can find. So there's going to be a different feel and vibe depending on what convention you're at, and depending on what portion of the convention you're at for a larger convention.
There's a question of which conventions we've gone to. The one I've been to the most is Gen Con. We've gone to a lot of PaizoCons, of course. We've also gone to TotalCon multiple times, the OwlCon, HowlCon.
Several different cons.
We've been to a lot of conventions.
Yes.
I started to remember all of them off the top of my head at this point. PAX we've been, PAX East, PAX Prime, yep. What was the one we went to out in, what was the other one we went out to out in California?
You went to a couple in California, I think, at various times throughout the last decade.
OrcCon?
That I was not in either of them. One of them was OrcCon.
Yeah.
And we also went to one in Iowa.
Yeah, what was that one called?
And I can't remember
that was a while
the name of the con. That was quite a while ago. And we also went to let me see what other conventions were there. There's
what was the one in Georgia?
Because we were never in Dragon Con, which is the big one in Georgia.
Yeah.
Where we maybe you went to Dragon Con.
I went to Dragon Con.
That gigantic one in Georgia. Yeah. So I've never been to
I did go to Dragon Con. Yeah. So
okay.
We've been to a lot of conventions.
Yeah. So we've been to a lot of different conventions over the time. And you went to one that was in Oregon.
Yes.
As well, was that Game Hall or something with
Game
the
Storm.
Game Storm? Those Game Hall and Game Storm are both different conventions, so I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
Which one was the one that you went to?
So we're not currently scheduled to go to any physical shows. I'd definitely be interested in going to an online show, which is another thing we can talk about here is online conventions, but they're sort of like their own category.
Online conventions are very different, and you don't need to use most of these tips in them because just regular online netiquette for hanging out in Discords or whatever social media platform the convention is on is basically the same thing in cons and not in cons.
I would say too that with an online convention you're more likely to see a heavier focus toward things that are scheduled rather than spontaneous.
Correct.
But if the convention does have spontaneous so you may just want to schedule yourself straight through.
Oh, and Rex Equipment's Origins, I was at Origins one time. So
it's like, oh man, which ones have we been at? We've been to so many.
We've been to other ones in the Boston area as well.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot we've got to. A lot of so many conventions around. I've actually been to Gen Con Oz, which not that many people have been to since they got rid of it.
So, yeah. that was cool.
It was just very random because we were in Brisbane anyway, and it was Gen Con Oz, so we just went there. And there weren't a lot of things going on, and we played Shadows over Camelot. I remember it was a Gen Con Oz, and my little brother was just convinced my King Arthur was betraying everyone. I was like, no, I'm giving you all of my cards. That's my power. You've all succeeded because I gave you so many cards.
I'm sure Morgana was just like, oh yeah, that's definitely Morgana.
He was just, and I was just like, it doesn't even make any sense that you're suspecting me. You've seen how many cards that I handed to everybody. You must be the traitor because this is completely illogical. He's like, no, Mark's the traitor. And then my middle brother was the actual traitor. And he just kept quiet.
Stoked it. Yeah.
He kept quiet, and then he instantly, when he revealed his traitor, we instantly lost.
I do still remember that.
Yep.
Even though he was at elementary school.
No, he wasn't in elementary school. No, absolutely not. When was the last Gen? When was Gen Con Oz? It was is more recent than that, Linda. Gen Con Oz was, it looks like in 2009 was at least when one of them were, because the 2010 was canceled. Yeah, I think we were in the last one. So it was 14 years ago. So, and that means that he was in high school.
Okay, fair enough. You can give
He was in high school, and it was very clear that I was handing him cards and that I had almost nothing left. So he's like, Mark is the traitor because on his turns he's incompetent. He hasn't done anything. I was like, look how small my hand is. I literally gave you the card that I needed.
And when he's 70, you'll still remember.
I probably will if I'm still alive.
He won't be. Anyway, so yeah, so in terms of I lost my train of thought. There was something I was gonna talk about in terms of like prep and like resources and things like that. I've definitely found that with conventions, like, look for opportunities to try new games that you haven't played before. You know, I know sometimes it can be like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing with this, but like, you know, try a new RPG, try a new board game. Nobody knows. A lot of people are learning, and it's a great opportunity to try out new things.
Another secret is bring snacks, and my recommendation is that rely on them for your food mostly, and only eat. I think it's better to do that and only eat occasional meals, like when things are winding down anyway, rather than trying to get breakfast, lunch, and dinner, especially at a crowded convention, because you're going to have to walk out, get to the place, or maybe go to food trucks, wait in a long line, and then eat the food, and it will disrupt you by a lot. Whereas if you have good snacks,
Concerning talking about you don't want to pay $13.99 for a slice of lukewarm cheese pizza at the convention center. No, I do not. Go to a nearby grocery store or other convenience store and pick up food in advance. Then you can get things that are healthier. You know, when we talk about snacks, it's not just like Cheetos and whatever. You can pick up some fruit, and you can pick up some other fruit and bagels and things like that.
For your health, for your timing, and for your budget. Linda and I are used to having a per diem for going to conventions, and if you buy the grocery food on your per diem, or just if you yourself have a per diem and from your own money, it's going to go way longer than any of the other things that you can get. It'll be healthier.
Yeah, granola bars are mentioned there, too. Granola bars are great things that you can... a hotel room coffee maker to make boiling water for ramen. Yeah, absolutely. Finding those things that you can get and have easily. You know, you can bring like a little baggie of cereal or other things like that. So you can eat things that are not so like heavy, and then you can just have them available at any time. And that's another thing the hand sanitizer is super convenient for, is like just to stop and have a snack.
That's right. So if you have like a kit of things to bring with you,
because I can speak from experience that it's entirely possible to get so excited by convention stuff that you forget to eat until you realize like I don't feel so good.
And then you just quickly eat a granola bar or something.
Yeah.
A trail mix.
Because sometimes also you'll have something where it's like, you know, your event number 1 went over, and now you're like, what do I do for event number 2? I don't have time. But if you have stuff with you, you can. Another thing to consider... That's
true, too, if you budget out a small break for lunch, but then it turns out not to be enough of a break.
Yeah. Another thing that can be useful, too, if you're at a convention that isn't, like, so massive, like, this isn't going to work so well at something like Gen Con necessarily, right? At Gen Con, I recommend there's a nearby food court that's good to go to if you're like, I need something pretty fast. But at a lot of conventions, you could also consider, like, you know, ordering delivery food, because then you can find a place to deliver it to, and you don't have to spend all that time. You can be like, oh, I'm going to order delivery back to my room, and I'm going to go back to my room and I'll eat it or whatever.
I've definitely done that when Linda was organizing Siege of
Galaspire
at PaizoCon, and Siege of Galaspire was just so ridiculous, and she was getting everything ready. And there is literally no chance that there was any time for her to get food. So I just ordered pizza and told them to deliver it to the hotel lobby. And we were able to bring it in for me, for Linda, and one of the other volunteers who was helping her out just a lot, setting things up, also didn't get a chance to eat.
And it was
so
like,
we gave him some of it too.
Yeah.
Right? So it just is a pretty convenient idea, and it's one that you may not immediately think of because you're in the flow of it, and you don't think, wait a minute, I can order food here.
Yeah.
But it's a good idea.
Another thing about, like, sort of food and drink, is that some folks really enjoy drinking at conventions, and some people have a lot of fun with that.
It can be a good way to socialize and network with
people.
I've gone to a lot of places that have drinks and then ordered water.
Yeah. So if you're going, you don't have to like drink alcohol to participate in that sort of thing. You sometimes see folks, just like everything else at a convention, who like don't sleep or like drink a lot or things like that, and then the next day they're just like, oh God, why'd I do that?
Yep.
So just it's best to decide ahead of time and know your limits.
I will say that it's clearly not quite as socially easy to be the person who's not drinking when everyone else is drinking. You can still go there, especially if they already wanted you to be in the group along with other people, but it's not quite as easy as it seems to be for the people who actually are participating in the main thrust of that as a lifelong teetotaler.
Yeah, so but you can still get like soda or like sweet tea or something like that. I find that people don't usually. It's more, at least in my experience, it's more of like a feeling that maybe they feel like you're not as included.
Yeah, nobody says that
nobody's
gonna
like tell you need to.
Yeah.
Pro tip in the chat: sleeping under the gaming tables is not a replacement for spending money on hotel room, even if HQ turns a blind eye. Yes, make sure you have a proper place to sleep. And speaking of things that you're gonna have around with you, I remember what I was gonna say before, which is packing in bags and how you handle those. Leave space to buy new stuff.
Yes.
Don't and you, while you may be tempted to bring all the things, like consider what you actually need, right? I know stuff definitely in some early conventions, like, oh, I might need this book or I might need this book, and then you take all these books. But if you narrow it down to what you need and then go to like, hey,
nowadays most people have a PDF.
Yeah, library. I'm going to use PDFs. I'm going to use like Archives of Nethys. Oh, but
when we started, most people did not have a PDF library.
Do not count on having an internet connection.
Yes, especially at a big convention, even if it's in the middle of an urban area where obviously there's a strong signal. If there's that many people there that it's just vastly straining the city's infrastructure to have that many people, they will also eat the entire signal.
Pre-download whatever you need for your PDFs and make sure you have them available. I also recommend to make sure that you don't run out of juice on your things, because if you're at a convention and you're in a random table in the middle of the room or whatever, you can never count on having an electric outlet. So I highly recommend an external battery to keep your phone and other devices charged.
At first, I thought you meant like actually making sure you had enough juice for the convention. And which would be part of the grocery thing, but yeah.
Yeah. Here's a recommendation here to pack a backpack in your stowaway for extra swag. Absolutely, backpacks are great. Or backpacks are like, purses can be solid too if they're big, but the back support, the support for the backpack, because like if you're carrying a heavy purse on your shoulder, like you can definitely get sore after a while. Whereas a backpack, you got it. You can wear it easily. There's a recommendation to bring a surge protector with a group so everyone can recharge their devices off a single plug at once. Great idea, for sure. So when you're packing, you also want to consider how you're going to, how you're going to secure your stuff. Because you don't want to, like, be in a situation where you're like, oh, I don't have a good way to move my laptop, but, like, you can't leave your laptop in a room or things like that. So having, like, a few different sizes of bags can be really convenient too when you're like, okay, I have a smaller bag that I can use for my laptop, and then maybe I can like not have to carry everything around all the time when I want to do stuff.
Yep.
There's another
more tips in chat about bringing a surge protector so your whole group can make sure you have juice.
Let your credit cards know you're traveling. Yes, for sure. Another thing to keep in mind is random niche thing, but budget a little extra time to go through security because TSA does not like dice.
Or maybe they like it too much.
Or maybe they like it too much.
No, I think they think it's plastic explosives or something. But a lot of the TSA people who also check for things and find out that their dice turned out that I've talked to, like, know about tabletop role playing.
Yeah, particularly if you're like in an airport which is a big convention and they know everybody's coming in or leaving or whatever. But just gaming stuff is gonna raise some eyebrows sometimes, so be ready for that.
Especially dice.
Yes.
So, I just think they must look like plastic explosives.
There's a comment there, TSA will ask you to open all your card decks. I've had them sometimes be like, what on earth are miniatures? And sometimes they'll just be like, what's going on with your bag?
Yep. Much more so than when I don't bring gaming stuff for sure. And
Yes.
it's wild because it'll happen on the way to Gen Con. It's like they must be stopping literally everyone then, except for the people, I guess, who are not tabletop gamers, because Gen
Yes.
Con has other types of gamers too.
If you are leaving a massive convention like Gen Con, be sure to get to the airport early and be ready for flight delays. We have had
And cancellations.
and cancellations, because those just slam the infrastructure. Like, we've definitely had experiences where we've gotten our flights canceled and redirected and things like that. So
And to be fair, one of the worst flight cancellations I've ever had was at Gen Con, but I think it was the time that like Delta's
Yeah, that was Delta servers
Delta servers just
went
completely
down exactly
went
then,
down
yeah.
because they lost power.
yeah,
It was not Gen Con's
it was not Gen
but it
Con's
was
fault.
not the
Yeah,
fault of Gen Con.
but it just happened
screwing
at
up
a time when there was a
infrastructure.
lot of people, and it just became even worse for that. Yeah.
And it was so bad that like some of us from Paizo were stranded in Michigan,
Yeah.
and we just had the day off because we literally could not get out of Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And
For an entire day.
it was
Yeah.
our adventure.
It was funny because we were seated on a plane, but they printed the ticket for the wrong day, and then they came out to us and like, your ticket's not for the right day. You need to get off the plane, and then they sent us to a random hotel. It was an adventure.
They because it was like we weren't gonna get on, but then we got on at the last minute. But then they're like it was wrong, so they pulled us off like literally off the plane after we
Yes.
were already seated. And other people from Paizo who were not part of our group
We're looking at
were
us
just
like, what is going on?
Because they were seated.
And then we told them the story later. It was an adventure. It was
Yep.
surely an adventure.
It sure was.
But related to that though, even if you don't have any travel related trouble, I recommend see if you can take the next day after the convention off of work, because the sort of come down from the convention and the energy of the convention. I'm always exhausted the day after, and I know a lot of other people are too. So if you can take that time to rest, it's a lot better for resetting your mind than trying to barrel right through it the full week, and it also makes you less likely to get sick. So
do a barrel roll.
it's smart. Let's see. So other things in terms of conventions, I think it's if you have prescriptions, you'll need to let your pharmacy know in advance, not the day before you leave. Please, I beg you. Yes.
Sounds like Kitef is maybe a pharmacist.
That maybe a personal experience there. Yes.
Mhm.
Make sure you have stuff squared away for packing and things like that instead of like waiting to the last second. And if you're like running events and things like that, the more you can have prepared and the less you're like, I mean, I know all GMs are guilty of like preparing at the last second during the convention, but really the more you can do in advance, the more time you have to enjoy yourself while you're there in terms of prep.
I don't think every GM prepares at the last second during convention. There's some who are just too afraid to do that, so they're already prepared ahead of time.
No, but I mean, some folks do, and
a lot of folks do.
a lot of folks do. And
I've definitely had to run things at conventions that I was forced to run with no preparation, but I don't think I've ever prepared at the last minute at a convention.
I totally have, and I don't recommend it. But I'll be like, oh, I know what the game is, but like I need to handwrite out the character sheets, and then it's like late at night, and I'm writing
I
things
should have
in my...
tried to prepare for the ones I was forced to run at last minute with no notice, but then again, there was literally no time.
You can't anyway. But you can't at that point. But yeah, it's like, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing, but I'll like print off the character sheets and handwrite them, and then I'm like sitting in the hotel room late at night. I'm like, why didn't I do this before? So yeah, like do all your prep beforehand if at all possible.
My favorite was when there was a group that just like demanded to play an adventure, and there was no GM for it. So I was like, "Is there anyone who knows this adventure?" And nobody did. I was at HQ, so I was just like, they really wanted to run it, and they were like, they weren't going away. So I was like, "I'll run it, I guess." I don't know anything about it, and so I did. And afterwards, they were like, "You really know this adventure a lot. Like, this was very impressive." And I was like, "Yeah, thanks." And I didn't even know from the name of it like what the adversaries were gonna be until like I found out as we went along that it had a lot of drow in it. Apparently,
I see a chat about last minute prep. You know, the weekend before is still much better than at the show.
Yes, that's true. That's not fully last minute. Project JCO is sitting here listening to us talking about last minute prep while last minute prepping scenarios for a con this coming weekend. There you go. Dustin had the Starfinder rulebook 24 hours before the con, was so scared, tried to run it, being like, "Oh, I have to for one day longer than anyone else did." Yeah, that's true. Sometimes, there were some people who had the Starfinder rulebook more in advance to make sure that they could prepare it.
But not
but
a lot.
Not very many.
Mm-hmm. No, I remember with like the playtest for that being like, oh gosh, we haven't had time to look, like frantically trying to look for it for like doing them to be prepared for doing demos on it. And it's like, oh, I haven't seen this until this week. All right, we're gonna quickly look through this and figure it out. But I guess one thing that conventions do teach you though is because conventions are a lot more likely to have GMs who like had other circumstances come up or they had to prepare something at the last minute or whatever. It's like, people are like pretty forgiving of like the little things that are different. And if you're players at a convention, I definitely recommend adopting that attitude too, because even if you're playing the same game as you're used to playing, people are gonna have different senses of what the rules mean, different house rules, different strategies, things like that. So it's a great opportunity to see ways that people engage with your favorite hobbies that are not the same as you and your friends usually do.
That's right. And the opportunity in the convention with all the different GMs, the different groups that you can play with, is assuming that your GM isn't literally on a horror stories forum or like on one end, or I guess like Matt Mercer or something on the other side. Most likely at a convention, if you play enough games, you're going to find the worst GM who's ever run you through anything and the best GM that you've ever seen eventually when you go through enough, and they're both going to be there. It's a way to experience the highs and the lows, to get a better sense of what the entire hobby is doing and not just your group, and to even learn a little bit that your group may be a microcosm even within your own game, even if it's actually a game that is smaller than Pathfinder or D&D that not as many people play. Even then, every group is their own.
And if you're someone who GMs, you can learn something from every GM that you have at a convention,
including the words who are the worst GMs.
Well, whether it's like, oh wow, that's an awesome trick that's an awesome trick to handle like introductions at the beginning of a session or what have you, or whether it's like, okay, yeah, that was kind of troublesome when that GM did that particular thing. How do I make sure that like I'm not doing that in my GMing?
That's right. I've learned never to just tell people their argument is invalid because I have multi-attack.
And sometimes those bad GMs become memes among your friends.
That's true.
I think the only ones who have earned meme status are like
multi-attack,
multi-attack, and then like the one who like literally lied about what was in the adventure to try to kill us.
Oh yeah,
that guy too.
That guy was interesting.
But unless you're like adversarially bending the rules to kill the PCs, like you're probably not gonna become a meme. That's my experience.
Multi-attack just gave himself lots of additional actions to murder us, and then we're like, you can't just do that. You're in the middle of doing it at full attack. What are you doing? And he's like, yes, I can.
What was like
your argument is invalid. I have multi-attack.
It was like this competitive event, and like there was this lady on the other team who was like upset about her character.
It was an Iron Player tournament, but we didn't know because it was a secret twist that in the last round we would have to go PvP against another table, which I'm not thrilled by, and I may not have even participated if I knew that there was going to be a PvP at the end of it. But one of the people in the group we were PvPing against was very upset, mainly because PvP is not very fair in Pathfinder First Edition. It's very easy to wipe out another party.
So the GM just decided to like throw a bunch of advantages to their team and then like be really harsh with our team, and it was just like, oh my god.
And just the monster was cheating against both of our teams, even in addition to that.
Yeah, that was an adventure.
That was multi-attack.
But usually though you'll have, talking about that one because it's just like kind of pathetic at that point. But then you also have ones like Mark was saying who are going to be excellent GMs, and I've learned a lot from the GMs. Like the thing I mentioned about like how to do introductions. Like I mean even some simple things that I learned from GMs, like the idea of having everyone have like a little card in front of them with their name and their character's name on it, or things like strategy, from convention GMs, it's like strategies for managing initiative, like the thing where you say, okay, it's your turn, it's Marisciel's turn, Valeros, you're on deck, you're next. Or, just stuff like that you pick up with from watching other folks.
Right.
and how they do things, or like the ways that people manage tracking initiative. You know, I learned from them too that it can be useful to have like a place where you can write initiative real big so that everybody can see it. And then I started writing initiative like in the corner of my battle mats and things like that. And then it's like, oh yeah, you know, I just picked that up. Or pass the initiative plushie. That's a really cool idea too.
Yep. And Dustin is wondering what we recommend if they go to leave the con and can't because it's a never-ending con run by the Fae in the first world.
So I think that the key there would probably be that as long as you're amusing the Fae, they're probably not going to let you.
So you should be really boring.
Yes.
And
keep doing the same thing over and over again, and eventually they'll bore of you. And
or
let
just
you
like
escape.
sit around meditating.
Yes.
And doing nothing, and not even interacting with the con.
But if you're not if you're not trying to escape a convention run with the first world, I recommend a variety of activities. You know, not just like even if you're usually going for tabletop role playing or board games or whatever you're going for, try other kinds of games. You can see like video game demos, card game demos. You can see panels that are places to learn about things, whether they're things that you already know a lot about or you know something new that you can get into. I'd recommend try to find opportunities to learn about something new and to go explore something that you're not familiar with. I always wind up enjoying and pick up some kind of souvenir for yourself. You know, whether it's like a new cool set of dice or like a miniature or a plush or like a new game or something like that. Something that you'll remember the show by. And a lot of conventions have independent artists who will sell their work there, whether it's, you know, like art prints or journals or knitwork or cosplay things and things like that. And it can be a really great opportunity to support people who are a part of the community and who aren't like, you know, the big business or what have you, but are instead like, hey, you know, I'm passionate about this. I'm passionate about like gamer culture and things like that. And so I made this. And it's a lot of fun. And Kitsune is talking about folks who can draw your PC. Absolutely. You can get, you know, and when you do, like, if they've got their business cards, take a business card and see what kind of opportunities you might have in the future to do commissions or other opportunities. So I've definitely found a lot of success with that. And then you could get things that it's like, I think that makes it more memorable where you get it from, too, if it's not like, oh, yeah, you know, technically I could have gotten this board game at any store, but like I could only get this thing that was handmade by someone who, you know, by a local fan who came to this smaller convention because I was here.
That's right. So it can make a good souvenir.
Mm-hmm. Whereas like I find that things that are just like thing with the name of the convention is like not as meaningful. I mean, sure, you might want to hold on to your convention badges, but like
that's great.
I like holding on to my character sheets from the different games that I play. I've got a whole folder of them.
Convention character sheets.
Convention character sheets from just the one-shots that you play. And then you go back in later on and you're like, oh, yeah, I remember that game or things like that. And business cards, so I mentioned them for like for like artists and things like that. But if you're looking to network business cards, bring your own and trade them with folks. Let them know what you're interested in. You know, if you're someone who is an author or artist, or like whether you are established or you're looking to get into the industry, conventions are a great place to network and to start building up those connections. And if you have folks, and if you're not just starting out and there's folks that you already know, take a look at the map of, you know, where the booths are and things like that, and then go visit the people that you know and check in with them and things like that. I've definitely found that conventions are a great place. You can go sit down with the folks you know and talk about projects and things like that, and then get work and come up with ideas, because especially if you live pretty far away, there's just something different about being there in person. In that environment surrounded by that energy and that creativity that works really well for sparking new ideas.
That's right. Dustin puts out Owen's couch talks as being good couch talks. That's definitely true.
Yes.
So just sitting on the couch with people at somewhere like PaizoCon is something you can do. At Gen Con, that's very difficult to like sit down on the couch and wind up next to someone who's like in the industry or who you can network with.
Speaking of games, I also recommend bring some of your own games. Not necessarily like, I'm Gloomhaven and I'm giant and need setup and need lots of teaching or whatever, but bring games that are like smaller in form factor and easier to teach folks, or games that are like popular games that a lot of folks know that don't take that long to play. Because then you can just say, hey, anybody want to play this? And when you're playing games that you might have a convention, particularly like a smaller convention, might just have hey, this is a board game hall, and you can come here and play games and bring your games or play the games that are here and invite people to play, and you can meet new folks that way.
Yep. So that's why I suggest having scheduled events that'll be your baseline to make sure you do something, but being willing to take any opportunity you see. Mm-hmm. It's like the rule of GMing where, instead of saying no when someone offers something or an opportunity comes up, you can say yes and, or yes but.
And on the flip side, expect that not everything you plan to do is going to work. There's going to be some event where, like, the GM didn't show, or, like, there was a scheduling conflict or something ran over and then you couldn't do that. So, like, having these ideas for how you'll spend your time when the thing that you were planning to do fell through. That way you're not just like, oh, man, this thing fell through. It's just like, oh, now it's a good time to go try this thing.
Use it as a starting point.
Yeah, exactly. And then that works really well. To just say, hey, this is what I was planning to do. This one of the things didn't work out. What am I gonna?
That being said, I usually stick to my schedule for the most part, but I've seen that the times I was willing to be flexible and pick up on opportunities have been some of the best situations. Just you don't always get those, so sometimes you do just stick to your schedule.
And having scheduled downtime slots, I really like doing that.
Yeah, trying to just fill every single minute is going to wind up making you just exhausted. Just filling every minute, not sleeping, and just loading up on caffeine is just generally a mistake. You know yourself, maybe that's just the thing you always do, but it's for most people, it's generally a mistake.
And I find that, it's a lot easier to form memories of a convention if you're not, like, going at a million miles a minute. Like, definitely, particularly, like, some of those first years going for Paizo, when it's like, oh, yeah, you're working, or like, the year that I did full-time HQ, it's like, after the fact, you realize, I don't really remember that much of what happened, because I was just in this blur of motion the entire time. So that's another thing, too. Remember me? We went at a convention. Ah, yes. Don't be offended if people don't remember your name when you met them at a convention, please, because a lot of folks are going to have trouble remembering folks that they met at conventions. Business cards are very useful for this also, as a tool for remembering people's names. But I have definitely experienced I recognize your face. I know I met you at this convention. I know I've seen you at these conventions several times before. I do not remember your name. So, there's nothing wrong with a little, hi, how you been?
So yeah, I think that's most of what I wanted to say about making the most of conventions. What about you, Linda?
Yeah, same here.
And
we
had a lot of suggestions and ideas
really
and questions in chat. Yeah. The chat was very lively today. So we'll still take questions, but I think we can say goodbye to YouTube.
Sounds good to me.
Bye, YouTube. See you next
time.
Bye.